So hormones are like wind. They can either provide a tailwind or a headwind. They can either make things easier or harder for you depending on whether they're well regulated, whether they're optimized for you. Optimized hormones create a tailwind and they propel you through life effortlessly, making everything feel easier, smoother, and more powerful. So, body composition is a huge factor in terms of not only hormone production, but also whether hormones are working with you or against you. So, for example, a headwind, low T, high cortisol, poor insulin sensitivity will cause you to struggle with fat gain, difficulty building muscle, and very slow recovery. So you're constantly fighting your own metabolism and your own hormone profile with unoptimized hormones. A tailwind would look like optimized T levels, optimal growth hormone, and insulin sensitivity, which would lead to a leaner, stronger physique with far less effort. So your body will naturally maintain muscle mass and burn fat very efficiently when hormones are optimized. So hormones are going to determine whether you're fighting against your body or whether you're flowing with it. In terms of longevity, headwind, higher risk of metabolic diseases, diabetes, cardiovascular issues, neurodegeneration. Aging will feel like a slow decline, fatigue, frailty, and brain fog with a hormonal headwind. With a tailwind, you will have better metabolic health, lower inflammation, stronger resilience to aging. Hormones are almost like an anti aging serum when they're optimal and balanced. And you want to age like a high performance machine. You do not want to break down prematurely. So, strong hormonal foundation is going to be the difference between thriving and merely surviving and then eventually falling off a cliff. Mental health, a headwind, brain fog, mood swings, depression, anxiety, feeling unmotivated, reactive, and stuck in negative thought patterns and thought loops. A tailwind will look like clear thinking, stable mood, mental sharpness, confidence, decisiveness, and drive. These things will all come naturally. So the right hormonal balance will make your mind a weapon and less of a weakness. Energy and vitality, how hormones make it feel like a headwind. Constant fatigue, poor sleep, no motivation, relying on caffeine to function, and struggling with your willpower. A tailwind with hormones will look like waking up energized, having deep sleep, and all day vitality. Motivation is effortless because your body's working with you. So when the hormones are dialed in, life really does feel like an open road and not a traffic jam. Performance in terms of athletics and training, a headwind, low productivity, really weak recovery, poor libido, always pushing uphill with very little ROI, very little reward for your efforts. A tailwind, high output days feel like a breeze. Faster recovery, higher drive, stronger libido. Your body is really optimized for peak performance and actually enjoys the sensation of effort because it feels easy. So, when hormones are optimized, the success in terms of your body composition and your performance and your energy levels feels natural and not forced. All right, let's talk about the pro-androgen flywheel, aka the androgen optimization flywheel. Probably one of my favorite simple concepts to really break down what it means to have strong inputs and therefore a high ROI in terms of your hormone health and what it does for your physique and how it just makes things easier down the road. So, for those of you who do not know, a flywheel is simply a mechanism that once it receives initial input, it will feed itself energy through its own inertia. So, in essence, once it starts turning, it'll keep turning itself. So, the starting input of the flywheel is a strategic approach to training, diet, and lifestyle choices that support testosterone and overall androgen health. Strength and power training, which is just heavy compound movements, squats, deadlifts, presses, things that activate large portions of muscle mass and trigger a sufficient nervous system stimulus to engage the hypothalamus pituitary gonadal axis. High intensity explosive movements like sprinting and jumping and resistance training will stimulate growth hormone and testosterone production. Nutrient dense, higher protein diet, prioritizing healthy fats, omega 3s, cholesterol, monounsaturated fatty acids, will promote the utilization of cholesterol to produce steroidogenesis and steroid hormones. Zinc, magnesium, vitamin D rich foods for optimal hormone production, and minimizing ultra processed foods and keeping your blood sugar well regulated to minimize cortisol. Lifestyle optimization, getting exposed to the elements, cold exposure, heat exposure, sun exposure, getting vitamin D, proper sleep, and stress management to reduce chronic cortisol, which suppresses testosterone. Having intentional disciplined behaviors, which will reinforce this mindset of hormonal dominance, having complete control over your lifestyle. So these inputs really create a self-reinforcing cycle. Once these are in place, a positive feedback loop will start. You'll have increased androgen hormones, testosterone, DHT, growth hormone, a lot of new production of anabolic hormones that are going to promote building muscle and repair. Resistance training and high quality nutrition will stimulate testosterone production. The lifestyle habits will ensure proper hormone synthesis and signaling. Lower cortisol will mean you'll be in a more anabolic state. You'll be able to build muscle much easily. You'll be able to build muscle much more easily. You'll have enhanced recovery. Your sleep will be better. You'll have faster muscle repair, better sleep, lower inflammation, more testosterone, higher protein synthesis and muscle regeneration, improved mitochondrial function, more cellular energy and reduced fatigue. You'll have improved performance with more power, strength, and endurance. You'll have higher motivation and aggression in a controlled, productive way. You'll also experience better cognitive function, better drive, more decisiveness, and this will continue to reinforce the cycle. So with better recovery and performance, you're going to train harder, you're going to eat better, you're going to sleep deeper, and each of these cycles fuels the next, which leads to exponential gains over time. All right, so let's talk about the key androgen hormones and their roles. Obviously, we know testosterone is the primary male sex hormone. It's responsible for growth, libido, bone density, metabolic function. We know testosterone is produced in the Leydig cells of the testes in men and in smaller amounts by the adrenal glands in both sexes. We know that it directly influences protein synthesis, red blood cell production, neurological function. But what you may not know is that testosterone can be converted into its more potent metabolite, DHT, aka dihydrotestosterone, or aromatized into estrogen or estradiol. So what we're going to do is just simply cover this androgen hormone metabolic pathway, highlight some of the precursors and some of the metabolites, and then leave you with better knowledge of exactly how this system works. So let's start with dihydrotestosterone, also known as DHT. It's more potent than testosterone. It's critical for hair, prostate, and androgenic effects, but let's dive a little bit deeper than this. So 5-alpha reductase is an enzyme that converts testosterone to DHT. DHT is a far more potent androgen than testosterone. In fact, it's about 3 to 10 times stronger than testosterone in terms of its affinity for binding to androgen receptors. Androgen receptors are essentially acting as the lock to the door, which opens into the cell, which then allows for an androgen hormone to be transcribed by DNA and then generate protein, which then has tissue effects. So if there is a battle between testosterone and DHT for an androgen receptor, DHT is going to win that battle. Critical functions, hair growth. So it's linked to male pattern baldness, but it's also linked to facial hair growth and just healthy overall growth of hair follicles in men. It's essential for prostate health and development. It plays a role in sexual differentiation and secondary male characteristics. DHT is non-aromatizable, which means it cannot be converted into estrogen. So DHT, the most powerful androgen hormone, excessive DHT can contribute to hair loss and prostate issues, but just know it's much, much, much stronger than testosterone, and it has a huge effect on secondary male sex characteristics. So the reason that you have other hormones within this androgen profile is to contribute to balance throughout the body. So it's not healthy to just have excessively high amounts of testosterone and have an imbalance in other areas. This is all designed for a reason. It's a highly complex, very intricate, sensitive system. So I just want you to understand exactly how this all works. Let's talk about androstenediol. Androstenediol is an intermediate in testosterone and estrogen synthesis. It has weak androgenic effects, meaning it's not necessarily going to contribute a ton to muscle mass or any male characteristics, but it does contribute to the androgen-estrogen balance throughout the body. Androstenedione, a direct precursor to testosterone and estrone, E1, which is just a type of estrogen. It's produced in the adrenal glands, testes, and ovaries, and it's actually used as a marker in endocrine disorders affecting testosterone and estrogen levels. You may have heard of DHEA before. DHEA is one of the more common hormones to supplement with, but it's also called dihydroepiandrosterone. It's a precursor hormone for testosterone and estrogen. It impacts energy, aging, immune function. It's produced in the adrenal glands. It serves as a precursor to testosterone and estrogen, and it plays a role in energy metabolism and the anti-aging process. So DHE levels decline significantly after age of 30, which contributes to the hormonal aging process in both males and females. And last but not least, androsterone, a weak androgen. It plays a role in steroid metabolism and hormone clearance. but really it's a metabolite of testosterone and DHT with weak androgenic activity, and it's part of the testosterone breakdown process, but it's not necessarily a primary driver of androgenic effects in the body. So, quick recap. Testosterone, main androgen, impacts muscle, libido, and overall sexual function. DHT is a more potent androgen, critical for hair, prostate health, and male traits. Precursors DHEA, androstenedione, and androstenediol, they fuel the steroidogenesis pathway and they lead to testosterone production. Androsterone is a weak androgen and it's mainly involved in steroid metabolism. So, testosterone is the central androgen, but DHT is the most potent and strongest. DHEA and androstenedione are key precursors that affect testosterone levels. DHT cannot convert to estrogen, which makes it critical for male development, but also plays a factor in baldness and prostate growth. And hormonal balance is essential. Too much of any of these hormones can lead to imbalances in the systems and the body, can impact mood, libido, sexual function, development, strength, etc. So the key to optimizing hormone levels naturally, as always, is going to be through nutrition, lifestyle, and training strategies. Okay, so let's talk about the mechanism of androgen metabolism and how testosterone actually drives growth within the cell and then within the tissues. Let's take this for example. Testosterone converts to DHT. DHT binds to an androgen receptor. And the analogy I use is that an androgen receptor is like the lock to the door that opens the cell and allows for an androgen hormone to actually be transcribed by your genetics or the androgen response element and then produce proteins and different metabolites that actually have a downstream tissue effect on the body. Some testosterone is converted into DHT via 5-alpha reductase. DHT has a much higher affinity for androgen receptors, so this illustration is apropos for what we're talking about. Androgen receptor activation triggers a genetic response within the nucleus. DHT is 3 to 10 times more potent than testosterone in androgen receptor binding. So once testosterone or DHT bind to the androgen receptor, the complex translocates into the nucleus of the cell. And this is where the AR-DHT complex will bind to an androgen response element, and then this activates specific genes related to muscular hypertrophy, cell survival, vascularization, etc. So some key genes that are activated with the androgen response element binding to testosterone or DHT. PSA or TMP RSS2, which is involved in tissue remodeling, myogenic regulatory factors or MRFs, which control muscle repair and hypertrophy, and then the IGF-1 pathway, which enhances anabolic signaling, leading to muscle growth. So the cool thing here is that gene activation leads to an increased transcription of muscle building proteins. Testosterone promotes mTOR, the mechanistic target of rapamycin, which is the key regulator of protein synthesis and recovery. More muscle fibers are recruited and repaired post-training, and this leads to greater muscle density, vascularity, and performance gains. And the key effects here is that more protein synthesis, the increased rate of protein synthesis via testosterone signaling into the androgen response element, will lead to more growth, faster recovery, less catabolism, which is just muscle wasting, enhanced blood flow and oxygen delivery. So again, takeaway real quick. Testosterone, DHT bind to an androgen receptor. This translocates into the nucleus. This binds with the androgen response element. It transcribes the hormone and then obviously produces some of the signaling and some of the pathways and some of the genes that will actually have a downstream effect and then promote this anabolic response within the body, which again leads to increased performance, increased muscle gain, increased vascularity, and cardioprotective effects, neuroprotective effects. The list goes on and on and on. But androgen metabolism is very, very key because it's not just enough to have testosterone floating throughout the body. It's more important that the testosterone or the DHT actually binds to an androgen receptor and therefore then can be translocated into the nucleus and therefore then promote or produce genes that promote protein synthesis, gene transcription, mTOR activation, anabolism. The list goes on and on. Okay, so let's talk about the steroidogenesis pathway, testosterone, androgens, corticosteroids, and then the subsequent breakdown process that occurs after. This biochemical metabolic pathway map illustrates how cholesterol is converted into a bunch of these other steroid hormones. including androgens, including testosterone, DHT, estrogens, glucocorticoids, mineralocorticoids, and understanding the transformation process is key for hormone regulation, metabolism, and endocrine function. So, what we're really looking at is the role of cholesterol, and cholesterol is the precursor for all steroid hormones. Conversion begins in the mitochondria via the cholesterol side chain cleavage enzyme, and this process forms pregnenolone. Pregnenolone is the parent molecule for steroidogenesis. All right, so let's start with androgen biosynthesis. How is testosterone made? What is the pathway that pregnenolone takes in this metabolic biochemical chain reaction? So, obviously, cholesterol side chain cleavage enzyme, pregnenolone. Pregnenolone then gets converted into 17 alpha hydroxypregnenolone via 17 alpha hydroxylase. 17 alpha hydroxypregnenolone gets converted into dehydroepiandrosterone via 1720 lyase, and then from there, dehydroepiandrosterone gets converted into androstenediol. So this is the final step for testosterone conversion. As you can see, there are many things that occur before testosterone just pops out of the body. But androstenediol then gets converted into testosterone, and then testosterone can be converted into DHT via 5-alpha reductase. Testosterone can also be converted into estradiol. So estradiol, also known as E2, is an estrogen hormone, and this conversion happens via aromatase. So something important to know is typically when people will take exogenous TRT, they will also often have to take something on top of that that's an anti-aromatase or an aromatase inhibitor, which converts excessive testosterone conversion into estradiol. This usually occurs via fat tissue in the liver and the brain. But then the androgenic and estrogenic balance is really important here. So testosterone is at the center of the androgen metabolism, and since aromatase converts testosterone into estradiol, this is really a key hormone for bone health, cognitive health, joint health. So balance is really important here. We don't just want excessively, extremely high amounts of testosterone. We want a proper optimal rate of conversion of testosterone into estradiol and also into dehydrotestosterone. So again, 5-alpha reductase converts testosterone into dehydrotestosterone. DHT is a more potent androgen, which is critical for male sexual development, has a big influence on hair, male pattern baldness, prostate health, etc. But some of the key enzymes in this process, 7-beta-HSD controls the conversion between weak and strong androgens. 5-alpha reductase, again, converts testosterone into DHT, and then aromatase converts testosterone into estradiol. So what's relevant here is you want a properly balanced nutrition system to support the cofactors for all these enzymes throughout the body, to support the optimal rate limiting conversion step of converting one hormone into another. And really, cortisol is going to obviously play a huge role here because cortisol is what will regulate your stress response, your metabolism, your inflammation. And high cortisol will actually suppress testosterone production by downregulating gonadotropin releasing hormone and luteinizing hormone in the body. But the mineralocorticoid pathway is also pretty important to understand, which also takes pregnenolone into progesterone, into deoxycorticosterone, and then into corticosterone and into aldosterone or into cortisol. So you can see how cortisol is actually linked to testosterone, and that's why they have suppressive effects on one another. Another important takeaway, is that in order to have an optimally balanced hormone profile, yes, nutrition plays a huge role, training stimulus plays a huge role, but not shying away from cholesterol in the diet, like egg yolks. Things like that are actually going to be really important for fueling the body's ability to create these hormones. And if you have low levels of these hormones or unoptimal levels of these hormones, it's likely something within this pathway, within this really complex process, whether it's occurring in the mitochondria or the smooth endoplasmic reticulum, that's really limiting your body's ability to have optimal balance levels of hormones.